Please welcome to the stage, Vice President, Engineer at Google, Royal Hansen.
It's great to be here. This is one of my favorite conferences, and I've known about it for many years, and it's a pleasure to be here. And as Sandra just said, it's actually a real honor to be a part of a community like this as you listen to the work that you all are doing, teams across the world are doing, how important it is. And so it's a real honor to be here, and thank you for coming to visit us today. I am going to talk about AI and sort of pick up what Sandra just talked about. And for many years, I've run a variety of security functions inside of the central part of Google. And that's included more and more AI work, as we'll talk about today. But first, I want to talk about complexity. I mean, we always talk in security about complexity being the enemy in some ways, and sort of simplification to help us manage the controls. And I was reminded when I first joined Google, this is about 7 years ago, there's a guy named Luis Barroso, who was an early engineer at Google and wrote this paper called The Data Center as a Computer. And it's sort of the beginning of cloud computing and what became at Google that abstraction so that developers didn't have to worry about the infrastructure at a lower level. He and I used to ride our bikes in California, sort of get to know. He was sort of bringing me on board and teaching me about Google. He's also a wildlife photographer. And so he started to make the contention or the sort of proposal that the complexity of the digital world we were building and building across the globe was reaching the same or similar levels of complexity, or at least comparable complexity, to the ecosystems or the biology. You think of all the complexity that happens in life. And it made me think, I don't know how many people have read or remember the paper 2014, Richard Danzig has a paper called Surviving on a Diet of Poison Fruit. Anybody remember this? It's worth going back and seeing. But it's all about cybersecurity. And he's sort of making the point early on that we needed to learn to survive and be resilient in cybersecurity, even if things weren't perfect. And so for me, I began to think, wait a minute, maybe we're not building bridges that are going to be static for 100 years. We're building and living in dynamic ecosystems, and that complexity is just inherent. And we need to take our lessons from the biological and the health and other sort of ecosystems that we're familiar with in other domains. This isn't the first time we've had a new technology. I was going to read this as sort of fun. My wife is a political theory PhD, so that's where I get these sources. But this is Plato in 370 BC. For this invention will produce forgetfulness in the minds of those who learn to use it, because they will not practice their memory, their trust in writing produced by external characters. So you're just talking about writing, the alphabet, will discourage the use of their own memory. You invented an elixir not of memory, but of reminding, and you offer your pupils the appearance of wisdom, not true wisdom, for they will read many things without instruction, and will therefore seem to know many things, when they are for the most part ignorant and hard to get along with, since they are not wise, but only appear wise. And it was helpful for me to remind, it's not the first time we've gone down this road. I in fact replaced writing with AI and used it in another presentation, and people wouldn't know the difference. So we've been here before. I oftentimes would use the analogy to railroads because I thought we're laying down infrastructure. But maybe AI is more like cars in the sense that there's a lot more freedom of movement, and you've got to anticipate. So think about all the safety and security technologies that we developed over the last 150 years or so, or maybe a little less, with cars. And so I think of AI as just an opportunity for us to build the infrastructure for the 21st century that will enable all the wonderful things we can do with AI. And I think it's important to remember, Sandra talked a little bit about it, but we're headed into the era beyond chat. I sort of use that, people know the Beyond Corp paper from Google. Beyond chat. The chatbots are interesting, but really what we're going to be doing is transforming the infrastructure and every sector on the planet. So whether it's hospitals, whether it's power lines, Think of all the infrastructure and the physical world that's going to be enabled by these agents. So that's the landscape. I think Sandra teed it up very nicely. This is not just about information anymore. This is about resilience in everything we do in life. I've been watching a lot of these videos, and the Demis Hassabis of the team who runs DeepMind talking about the history of AI. And I was reminded of my own experience with, back in the mid-90s, I did my thesis with David Lerntner, and it was just using a very, very baby version of AI. Instead of the trillions of parameters you hear about now, this is just 30 years ago, this was 100 parameters or so, and we built a very small version of a sort of cluster analysis. Think of all the nearest neighbor types of algorithms you use. This is just in our lifetime. He has a book that he published in '93 called Mirror Worlds, which begins to anticipate the world we're living in. It's really amazing that just in our lifetimes, we're beginning to see the reality of things that were just being imagined only 20 or 30 years ago. And I'll give you one more just personal dimension to this. Some may know, but this is my son, Soren, who's 15, and he's headed into his 6th year out of school. He's homebound and incapacitated in a variety of ways, sort of from long COVID and the sort of chronic illnesses. But it reminds me of all the people around the world, whether it's for health, whether it's for energy, food, education. Think of all the societal problems we still wrestle with. I really think back to that vision of the early academics who were building these capabilities. We're going to be able to answer and solve problems that we couldn't have even imagined. We couldn't even ask the questions in the past. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the exciting examples before we get to the risks and how we're managing those. So I think it's worth taking a second on this to appreciate it. But have you ever heard of AlphaFold and the Nobel Prize in this area? 20 amino acids in the body. They make up about 100,000, hundreds of thousands. They estimate 200,000 to 400,000 proteins. And what was going to take literally hundreds of millions of years for us to figure out how those proteins, so those 20 amino acids, can fold into these really complicated proteins. Demis and the team at DeepMind did it over the holidays a couple years ago. It was literally a 2-week project. They said, let's feed this through and let's try and do all of the proteins. But it's this kind of work that's feeding the health and medical work that I just alluded to. So this is not just information, this is not entertainment, this is literally the lives and well-being of the planet if we can do these things well. The one other example I'll talk about is the AI co-scientists, and as you get a chance to play with this or look at it, it's really a remarkable example of using an agent. You get scientists who will put an outcome or a goal into co-scientists, and then using all of the scientific literature and increasingly actual data from experiments, it will propose hypotheses and steps that go into it. And then like a chess game, you'll get an ELO score where these compete, and you see that on the right, each evening, or you come in the morning and you see which hypotheses are doing well. So again, I start with these examples because before I show you this slide, I want you to realize we're not just making the world a little bit safer or sort of navigating today's risks. Your work will be the work that enables those kinds of innovations. And for so many years, we've talked about security as an enabler. I really think we're sitting at a moment with explosive opportunity, but real risks from using agents. And so our work as a collective is going to be super important in enabling that. You see just 3 examples here of what the surveys say about the AI work and agent work inside of enterprises. The first one, before I came to Google, I was at American Express, Goldman Sachs, it's sort of typical enterprises. And this whole idea of consumerization of IT was a huge challenge for the security teams. And you see that already happening with agents, models, et cetera. People are getting out ahead of the security teams in many cases. The next 2 are really identity and access risks, which, as you would expect, are challenges in the world of agents. And we'll talk a lot more about that in the next few slides. but I don't think that anything like this should surprise this group. The one thing I would say is these are ecosystem challenges. It's not just about one system. Agents are open-ended in ways that you have to anticipate, and this is back to that biological example, how you're going to survive even in a world where you don't know exactly how an agent might perform in all cases. You need an ecosystem that keeps that agent safe. So what are we doing? People may know from Google, and this is one of the reasons I joined the team 7 or 8 years ago, Secure by Design was the spirit of what we did after the Project Aurora attacks in 2009. We rebuilt from the ground up using the whole Zero Trust and Beyond Corp things, which people have heard for many years. We're taking that same spirit of Secure by Design and beginning to apply it in the context of agents. So the same thing we did with cross-site scripting, with frameworks for internal developers, we're now doing the same for agents. You see those 3 principles, and I'll walk through each of them. Human oversight, innovation with control, and transparency. What I love about them is they're not just the technical approaches, but these are societal questions, and there are roles here for the non-technical communities as everybody becomes technical in a world of vibe coding or whatever you want to call it. First, you'll see on the video here, this human oversight. So this is a Gemini in Workspace, and it's walking through a deletion of some calendar entries, and you can just see that it gets asked a question, do you really want to do this? Sort of that simple idea of a human in the loop. What I think is most interesting about it, because in some ways you would expect that, but again, you got to anticipate a world that's more open-ended, and not every action will be fully anticipated. So what we're working on, back to the framework point, is every developer shouldn't have to develop a different way of putting the human in the loop, or a different way of throttling the output to say, once you get past this threshold, I want you to pause and ask for the human to have some input. So we're building a framework that categorizes and makes available as a service, and ideally these would become open source and we work in different industries, so that you as a developer can call that service and sort of step up the human oversight based on detection of, it's almost like an event-driven program, but with agents. So having these be standardized and reusable and scalable is critical. It also, one of the things I really like about it is it will allow users to become familiar with the technology. One of the other things about AI, and that's why I like the car analogy, is people have to learn what they're going to do with it. This is not a web front end that everybody just follows the screens. It's like use cases where wire diagrams say exactly what the user can do. It's a lot of open-ended work here. Users need to feel comfortable they can incrementally take advantage of this technology and still feel safe. So having these kinds of harnesses around or controls around it, but still allow them to push further if they're comfortable, is exactly the kind of control that will help society take advantage of the technology and remain secure at the same time. The next example, innovation with control, and this is something you've seen probably from Google in the context of whether it's in privacy or on websites with consent. Here is Gemini inside of, in this case, inside of Gmail, but it's looking to get files. You see Project Astra there, and it's obeying the identity and access controls that you would expect. And you see the person sort of poking around, trying to find whether they can get access to this project. Think of all the insider risk work that we manage as a community. This is exactly the kind of thing you would expect to get from the tools. But what's interesting is that the paradigm for an agent is the agent an assistant, that it's sort of a clone of you? Is it a team member with their own access control? Or is it a functional owner and it will perform a service within a certain set of bounds? All of those things, whether it's the authorization, the authentication, think of OAuth policies, the data leakage, the leases, you might get access for a certain period of time. all of that needs to be built in and honor the idea of an agent. But the problem is an agent in the context of entertainment will be different than the context of an agent in a hospital. So those policies need to have not just a set of rules, but they need to have a paradigm for how an agent will work on a team or as an assistant or as a function. All of which needs to obey these sorts of rules. And I don't think we'll be able to do this, obviously, with just rules. We're going to have to think about using the technology to help us solve those very problems. And I'll talk a little bit about that example in a second. The third is transparency, and close to the heart of a lot of the incident response and the community that Mandiant and team have worked with for years. It's easy to think of transparency as just logging, right? We want to log all the things that an agent does. But I'd argue, and this is, you're looking at the Gemini admin and your ability to navigate and look at whether the actor was an agent or not. But the point is that same idea. We want a societal paradigm for an agent. I was working with a state the other day who was thinking about, okay, what's a model or an agent-driven incident? And so they were clearly thinking of this not just as a technical incident that was handled sort of in the back room, but these would become societal incidents, and there would be legal and other ramifications. And we need to work through all of that and the associated technical requirements to support it. So those are the three principles. They're all part of a subset of the SAFE, the Secure AI framework, which we released a couple years ago. And there's this paper that, if you haven't seen, is by Santiago, Christopher, and Kara from the Google team, is one of the most downloaded papers on the research site. So if you haven't taken a look at it, it goes into much more detail on the things I've just talked about. And we will continue to publish and ideally make some of these things open source from a technical perspective at the same time. So take a look at that, and if you have ideas, we'd love to collaborate with you on them. Now, I alluded to this a little bit. We are not going to be able to solve those problems, build those tools, without also using AI to solve the problem. It sounds a little recursive, but I'll talk about what I think it means. In our instance, the reason I put these up, I've used this slide for several years. You know, in Gmail, or first in the App Store, 125 billion app-to-device combinations we scan for malware. We do the same thing in phishing and spam in Gmail, and then people may know safe browsing on over 5 billion devices, not just Chrome, but several other browsers as well, blocking known phishing sites or other abusive patterns. All of that has been done for many, many years with AI. And sort of whatever the state of the art of using AI, that's the only way you can keep up with the scale of the challenges we're up against. That same spirit is going to apply here. How many people just know what a cobbler is? If I said the cobbler's children, it depends on. I realize the demographics. Sometimes I get people who think they say blueberry or peach when I say that. So we really have to avoid being the cobbler's children here. I learned in Brazil that it's the blacksmith's children who have a wooden stick. So there are analogies all over the world on this, but let's not be the people who are busy trying to solve these problems, but not becoming great at using AI in the process. And that takes experimentation, makes some mistakes, and iterating. So I'm going to take you through a couple of examples. And this first one, Sandra talked about with Big Sleep. The point I wanted to make is the reason to do Big Sleep is not just to help find vulnerabilities, and it's to fix them. And I really think one of the big areas of focus is to combine that capability of vulnerability discovery with coding agents. So think of Gemini in the context of coding. And the real power here is when the vulnerabilities are found and fixed, just like that co-scientist overnight. You just come in and find out what's been fixed. And so a lot of work at Google right now in trying to extend the full software development lifecycle into the ability to deploy quickly. As we all know, one of the hardest things is not finding a vulnerability, it's in fixing it, testing it, and getting the team that has to own the downside, the availability, to feel comfortable pushing that patch or that update. So think about that as one area where we're using AI to help solve these agentic issues. Then I'm going to spend the rest of the time just on shopping as an example. So when I think shopping, and this is sort of a new release from Google, but this could be healthcare, this could be transportation, this could be energy. Each sector is going to have its own story like this. So human oversight, control, transparency in the context of shopping, something everybody does. We've worked for the last year or so, I guess timelines, with the model context protocol and the agent-to-agent protocol. But now you're seeing the first of what I think will be many industry, sector, or use case specific protocols. So this is the agent payments protocol, built off of that A2A and MCP spirit. Just to give you a sense of what's in there, and these are really interesting protocols because you get signed mandates. So you're taking the language of a payment, so the intent of the payment, the specific item, and the final price gets signed cryptographically because agents are going to pass these around to multiple places, and you don't know exactly who may execute the final transaction. So you've got to have a system that can honor each of those parameters in the transaction. You've got a separation of concerns. So if you think about, I'll go to the next slide, the ecosystem, merchants are everything from the biggest companies in the world, the department store type companies, all the way to sort of mom and pop shops. Everybody's going to be want to be a part of this ecosystem, and so the role of a merchant, the role of a payment provider, and everybody in between needs to be anticipated. And if you go deeper in this model, it actually has roles for those users, for the payment, for the merchant, and others who facilitate actions in the whole process. That risk is going to vary dramatically if you're in an e-commerce setting and if you're in a hospital. But I fully expect that you'll start to see instances of that protocol developed for these other sectors. You're all going to be better at that. The key here is it's not going to be just a Google that's participating in that. We need sectors to take ownership and really drive these things to the next level of security. I put this example up here because I really think it's one of the more exciting parts of using AI to solve these problems. We've talked about least privilege and security for decades. And it's always incredibly hard because humans inevitably over-provision because they don't want the headache of when you don't get the group right, that somebody has access and you've got to slow down, you've got friction in the process. We're starting to see examples of what we call either a guardian or a supervisor agent that might be sort of sit alongside like a sidecar, your agent, and it knows when you say, I need access to this room for this meeting at this time. That's just an example of the spirit of it. Don't clone my access to that building, which is inevitable, the way we provision things in technology organizations. But only give me, and for only the time limit of that meeting, access to that one room. That's not going to be a set of rules we write. We're going to have that built into these sidecar agents, and the sort of sidecar agent will figure out what the agent needs and for how long. To me, this is an example of where we can actually increase the security in spite of the complexity and other challenges I've just talked about. The same spirit here, this is sort of think of this as a query that might go into or a prompt for a shopping. Earbuds, comfortable, sound, battery life, cost. Think about the parameters. This is just like when your credit card, when you say, show me all transactions over $100, notify me when the balance gets above this level. Those will stop being settings pages, but will become integral to the journeys themselves. You're not going to be able to do that with a bunch of rules. We're going to have to do that using the technology itself. And the beauty of that is it becomes both a better experience for the user and it becomes more secure at the same time. And again, lots of us in security, oftentimes we're the problem. I think there's actually could be an opportunity where people realize, oh, we're getting some convenience and security with this modernization. So where do we go from here? It's early days, but as you've seen, people are adopting these and testing them quickly. We are participating across the industry. You see the Frontier Model Forum. It's worth looking today. We just published a new paper. It speaks specifically to sort of influence and the way these foundational models may influence people. But it's a wonderful forum where the companies across the industry are coming together to raise the bar on security and safety. ML Commons, if you haven't seen, is a great, and it's a big community that's beginning to work on the standards and testing of these models to rate them and look at the different domains of risk. World Economic Forum, so this isn't just a technical thing, this is a commercial and economic question or a political question. And COSI is where we pushed a lot of the SAFE, the Secure AI Framework work, under the Project Oasis license, and it's sort of a nonprofit community. And then lastly, C2PA, this is in the context of content. It has to be cryptographically signed so we know whether it came from an agent or who handled it. And it's processed by whether it's your phone or a website. It's on the Pixel right now. But again, these are industry standards. So if I leave you with one thought to that industry standards, these are not going to be solved by one company, these kinds of risks. The beauty of what we're trying to do with agents and AI is for the collaboration across the best and brightest minds on the planet to solve some of these really thorny problems. They need this ecosystem to stay both open, so you can collaborate, but secure and safe, and that's where the enabling comes. It's going to determine how quickly we can tackle the energy problems we have, and whether that's the distribution or the optimization of our current energy, or the future of fusion and others. Transportation, health, close to my heart, but I think we all have a friend, colleague, family member who suffers in some way and could benefit from better drug discovery, better treatments, better awareness of even these treatments. So as we go do this work, this is not just the plumbing of all of the infrastructure, all the technical infrastructure. These are becoming sector-specific, mission-critical jobs, whether that's in finance or any other industry. Thank you for coming today. I'm happy to talk afterwards, but look forward to your collaboration as we all move into this brave new world. Thanks.